This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, I'm calling this meeting to order. Gail, you can probably see everybody who is attending. I cannot. So is there anybody that needs to be introduced that we don't already know?
Yes, as a matter of fact.
Besides,
we have two people who are not committee members. We have Scott Hess, who's the new Community Development Director for the City of Warrenton. Scott, did you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and say hello?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just a minute late, but Scott Hess. I've been here with the city for just a little over a month now, like 5 weeks, and so I'm still claiming that I'm the new guy, which is nice. Came here from northern Utah with a planning background with county, city, and kind of multi-regional metropolitan planning organization level, and happy to be here. Sorry that I was a minute late.
no problem. Thank you.
Okay, and then we also have Carol Connell, who does contract planning with the City of Gerhardt. Carol, did you want to say anything?
Hi there. Well, I'm just listening in mainly. Don't have anything to report. I've been in Gerhardt since 2013. And we have common border with the county. I'm interested in river stream setbacks, dune management, and dune grading.
Okay. Wonderful. So here in a minute, I'm going to ask everybody to introduce themselves because we have a couple new members. Really brief, just say who you are, kind of why you're on the committee. And then moving forward, the way that I'm going to run the meeting today is that I will set aside time for public comment, but you public there, go ahead and feel free to chime in, and we will stay with that method unless it gets a little bit too disruptive, and then we'll go back to committee members and then public input. So I see you first on the screen, Diane, so why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
Okay, I'm Diane Heinz. I've lived on Smith Lake for 42 years, and I'm interested in how the county develops the Clatsop Plains area. That's it.
Thank you. And I'm Mary Kemmis. I'm the chair of the committee by default, and lifetime resident of Seaside, but really family connections all through the county from Cannon Beach to Astoria. Think that's all you need to know. Don, you want to go next?
Okay, here I am. Don Abing. I am a member of the Chinook Indian Nation. And I have help here. I'm sorry. Come on now. My wife and I are on this committee because we have a vested interest in our ancestral land. And she is a Clatsop Chinook. And we are here.
Okay, great. So Scott, I know that you introduced yourself, and Carol, you said a little bit about yourself. Is there anybody else besides Gail and Julia?
Yes, Carol Johansson has joined the meeting.
Okay. Carol, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? Carol, can you hear us?
Her mic is muted.
Okay. Carol, can you unmute your mic and introduce yourself, please? Technology is always a challenge. Well, maybe we can get back to Carol later, but I'd like to keep moving on. Committee members. Oh, Carol, there, I can see you, but I can't hear you. Well, we'll go ahead and move on. Did everybody get a chance to look at the minutes? We had like 3 months of them to go through. Any comments on those? You're either all on mute or you have nothing to say.
We looked through them, but I have to relook at them again to recall where
Okay.
we have concerns.
Okay. So did you want to come back to that later?
Yeah.
Okay.
The reason I speak, Chinook Councilman Devin Abing will not be able to attend our meeting today. He is presently at University of Washington Hospital completing his testing and visiting with physicians and stuff up there concerning his LVAD.
Okay. Well, I hope it goes well.
Thank you.
So moving right along, our goals today are to action items, actually, kindly provided, to review Table 1 existing policies, Table 2 Clatsop Plains Community Plan existing policies, and then Table 3 new issues and policies. So I think, Gail, if you could move us to Table 1. There we go. So I trust that we've all had a chance to look at these. Just this first part here, staff recommendations on all of these are to retain policy. Any comments, changes? Hearing none, it sounds like we will, our recommendation is to follow staff recommendation. And then thank you, Gail or Julia, whichever, for providing the background on Goal 8. I do have a question on that, and this might be a good time to bring that up. And that is, I see that under the Clatsop County Comprehensive Plan, that Goal 5 apparently includes Oregon recreation trails. Is that correct?
That's correct, but I believe the memo was prepared by Ian Sisson, who's our senior planner, and I believe that there are 2 trails, Saddle Mountain, and I forget the other one. That
Oregon Coast.
Oregon Coast, that
Yes.
we need to actually incorporate into the comprehensive plan because they weren't designated as such when the plan was originally adopted.
Okay, my question, I guess, is why is this not, why are recreation trails not under recreation on Goal 8?
I don't know the answer. I know that there are specific items that are spelled out in ORS, and it doesn't mean that you cannot look at it as part of Goal 8 as well. But why they separated the 2 out, I don't know that. They being
Okay,
the state.
that was just a little puzzlement to me, that's all. So, but thank you for providing the Goal 8 information. Is there anything else on Table 1? Then moving on to Table 2, Wild Scenic Rivers, Views, Sites, and Trail Resources, Existing Policies, Clatsop Plains. So this is pertaining to the Clatsop Plains specifically. So I have a couple things, but I'm opening it first of all to committee members and public. Okay. So my question, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I should have spent more time looking at this, but the streams and rivers that are in the Clatsop Plains, you're affected by That would be, I need to recall that. And then I'm thinking about the shorelands, that is the dunes. How much dune area does the county have that might be affected by both vegetation and grading issues that I think you might want to consider. I'm sorry it's so vague, but I know I need to dig deeper into this.
Okay, Carol,
Okay.
would your question about stream buffers and things, we're actually just reviewing wild scenic rivers, the federal waterways or the federal scenic rivers, the state waterways, the Oregon trails, and scenic views. So are you considering that as part of scenic views, or did you actually want to talk about watersheds and groundwater, which is something that we have discussed a few meetings ago? Did you ask me to come back to that?
Well, if it's too late and I missed that chance, then I guess I missed it. But I think that you're right. I think I'm talking about streams, but shorelands is also on this particular goal. Coastal shorelands and other shoreland policies. So let's just go to that, because I guess you're right about the rivers.
So restate your concerns again, please, Carol.
Okay, so is this correct that you have two policies for shorelands, right, as I see them here?
No, so the way that we've broken down our process, Carol, and this will probably help clarify where we're at, because Goal 5 has so many resources and it covers so many issues,
Right.
we've been breaking it into small pieces according to the inventories. So 3 or 4 meetings ago, we looked at the historic and cultural resources, then we did groundwater resources, we've done wildlife habitat resources. This month, we're focusing on the, like I said, the trails, the federal rivers, the state waterways, and the scenic areas. So what we've been doing is we've been not only pulling the policies out of Goal 5 related to those particular resources, but also from the community plan as well, or other goals where the policies overlap or address the same thing, so that everybody is getting a context that is not just we're focused on one tiny little piece of it. So that's, there are actually, you can see we've pulled policy 4 and 5 from the community plan, but there's at least 3 that come before it, and I don't remember if there's anything after policy 5 related to coastal shoreline. So we pulled the ones that would tie into the topic that we're discussing today, the federal rivers. Yeah.
Okay, and so forgive me for having to digress. And you know what my issues are, and of course I only sent you that today, Gail, and I don't know exactly where they fit in, but I'm just hoping they'll be considered. And these are quite general policies at this point. So would you think dune grading or dune vegetation would apply to any of these sections, or setbacks from streams and rivers? Probably not.
The streams and rivers setback, which I did see your email, I would say is probably not going to tie in well with what we're looking at now, which again is yeah. So I mean, perhaps some of the dune grading, which does affect scenic views and things like that one way or another, depending on how you look at it. I mean, there may be some tie-in with that issue.
And is the committee interested in considering that?
Well, I believe our interest is in hearing public input and to hear what concerns are, regardless of where it is. So, but Carol, now that we can hear you, could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, I'm the other Carol that introduced myself at the beginning, City of Gearhart.
Oh, okay. Okay. Sorry about that.
That's okay. And I just come and go a little bit here with your committee because the Clatsop Plains is against the urban growth
Yes.
boundary in Gearhart. Okay, and so I guess I'll just make my point and then you carry on. And that is that dune grading is a controversial topic. And the policies that you have within the comp plan would help deal with that topic that you may come across in the future. And I believe, the state is involved on the shorelands when you get into dune grading, and you have to have a dune grading plan that looks at the entire section of or area of dunes you're talking about as one piece. And I'm just bringing this up because we've had this happen in the city, and I know there are lots of dunes outside of the city on the waterfront, the ocean. And so the controversy is some people want to cut down the dunes in front of their house because they've lost their view of the ocean. And yet when an individual does so, it affects the rest of the dunes and the amount of water impacts on other properties. And I guess I'm just suggesting that it's worth acknowledging that anybody can't just go cut down their dunes on their private property. That's my concern. And the other one is in dunes is that, that vegetation, once you start letting invasive vegetation get into the dunes, it takes over. And so it's a problem for us in Gearhart that is surely going to spread beyond our boundaries. And we're trying to deal with it. And so those are the dune issues that I'm bringing up right now, the dune grading and the effects, and the vegetations that is allowed in dunes, particularly invasive vegetation and their effects. And I would think you'd want to discourage that.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. And I'm sure this will be in the minutes. This may sound, hopefully this sounds active enough, because I am just a citizen and this is not my job. And so I'm not as familiar with all of the policies and plans. However, I think that you have a good point. And if there's something, I'm sure that there is, in the plan that we need to look at and maybe clarify, we may call on you later for additional clarification. But
that's great. I'd be totally happy with dealing with this later on.
Okay. But this is going into the minutes, and so it is an item that we can bring up later, if you don't mind, because I don't see under the things that we're working on today how we would address this. Am I clear there, Gail?
Yes, you are, Mary. And just to clarify, I put Carol's email up on the screen that she sent with her comments earlier today so that everybody could see them while she was talking about them. And I did email them to the committee members. I think that the issue that Carol is raising with the planting and the grading of the dunes, I think would be more appropriate for goal 18 than it probably is going to be for the scenic views that we're talking about here right now today. But everybody does have your comments. Also, with regard to the setback, we did talk about some changes and including some setbacks even from non-fish bearing streams. I think, and Julia, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think 100 is what the Forest Practices Act calls for. So this would actually be a doubling of that in the non-resource land areas. Is that correct? Do I remember correctly?
You do. You remember correctly.
Okay.
Yeah, and I understand, if you don't mind, I know that, but there is also interest in expanding the minimums of the forest National Forest rules or other agencies, and particularly the Columbia Gorge Management Plan was just updated, and they spent a lot of time on this topic, and they decided to proceed with a 200-foot setback, which, obviously is better protection for the fish-bearing streams. And I just threw that in. I understand it's last minute, and maybe this is not the right time, but that you wouldn't be the first to do that, and you could be more restrictive, I believe, if that was of concern to you. And Gail, I agree. I'll just stop talking after this. That you're probably right about goal 18. I'm sure you are, about dunes and dune grading. Dune vegetation can be addressed then. And if you want to go back to streams at a different time, I'm okay with that. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you for your input. And Gail, would it be possible to put it on the agenda for goal 18 to look at this at that time? Bring this back up?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Okay, good.
Ken, excuse me.
Yes.
Carol brought up a good point on that 200-foot setback. The Chinook have explored that also and are aware of what was going on in the gorge via other indigenous nations that are vested in that area. And Chinook is not opposed to a 200-foot setback. And we agree with Carol.
Wonderful. Well, I think that that's something that we've already addressed, but Gail, would it be possible to put it on a future agenda like next month to revisit that just briefly?
Yes, we can do that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Because I'd like to think about that a little bit more and see the wording that is currently we're proposing and see if it meets our goals. Okay, anything else? Well, I do have something, and that is on table 2, policy 4, under transportation policies. So on your PDF, it would be, there we go, unnecessary rights of way should be used as green belts, walking trails, or bike paths where appropriate. And what I'd like to open for discussion is also, it says walking trails, but what about non-motorized use? And the reason why I bring that up is you may or may not know, I have a horse, and there is a significant constituency in the county of riders, and the trails available to us are getting to be less and less. And I understand the concerns, and that's not my goal, is to bring up that debate, but I'd like to leave this open so that it's not just walking trails, but maybe non-motorized use. So I'm open to your thoughts on that.
We concur with Mary. Chinook would not like to see a diminish of trails that utilize horses and mules and or even donkeys. We are aware of indigenous people who are disabled and make use of their equestrian animals for packing and for traveling on what is available and not locked up by private property.
Thank you, Don. So would it be possible to make a recommendation to change walking trails to non-motorized use trails? And just to make the language a little more comprehensive in terms of, or flexible in terms of the use. Would that be possible? Does that sound good?
Chinook would concur.
So Gail, thank you. So Gail, could we add that as one of our recommendations? Oops, I'm
Yep.
looking at mine and you've already done it.
Already there.
Thank you so much.
I
And
would
then
also like, oh, Mary,
Yes.
I would also like to point out that there's a significant percentage of area in the northeast area of towards the Nikolai of Clatsop that has a huge amount of area that is available for motorized um, vehicles, and it used to have some ancient trails in there for that indigenous people used, and unfortunately those are probably all gone now because of the motorized access. And I know that there were horse trails in that area, but again, I think they've been taken over by the motorized people.
Thank you for that information. Again, I just want to make sure that the language doesn't exclude non-motorized. And since these are unnecessary rights of way that we're hopefully using as green belts, trails, or bike paths where appropriate, I'd just like to make the language a little more inclusive. Okay, if there's nothing else on that, on policy 7, and that is on the next page. So, yeah, so Clatsop County will work with Oregon Parts, blah, 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 to provide additional trail connections between the north end of Camp Riley, the beach, and Fort Stevens to the existing Fort Sea Trail. Staff comment and recommendation: while informal trails may exist, the Oregon Coast Trail Map does not show any trails outside of the public beach between Fort Stevens and Gerhardt. And the recommendation is to retain the policy and also include in Goal 8. And so I pulled up the Oregon Coast Trail Map, and it's pretty straightforward. I mean, it just goes from the jetty down to Oswald West. And then I guess I just had a question, and I don't know if you can answer this or not, Gail or Julia, and that is the trails in Fort Stevens, the Delora, Freedom Trail, Burma Road, Sleepy Hollow, Strawberry Knoll. Are those just state park trails? Because I believe that those have access to the beach as well. So I was just a little puzzled on that. You do not have a copy of my map. These are horse trails, and so this was done by the Oregon Equestrian Trails. You don't have that. They might be on the Fort Stevens map, but I was just curious, do those need to be included in the plan, or are those accesses considered the informal access?
Yeah, so I think you may be right, Mary, that we probably need to include them and address them. And frankly, I wasn't aware of them because I don't spend that much time at the park. So I went basically off of this map and aerial photos where you could see paths that have been cut through the dunes or some of the underbrush that aren't really established as formal paths.
So I guess my question is, do we need language in policy 7 to protect those informal access points, or are they just informal access points that perhaps come and go over the decades?
Yeah, as far as I know, they're just people who are cutting through the vegetation, and at least from my experience in Florida, you really don't want to encourage people to be cutting through the dunes and making their own paths, because that destroys the vegetation, and it leads to dune erosion or destabilization. Maybe things are different out here, but I know coming from Florida, that was a big thing, is that you always tried to channel people to officially marked access points so that you would keep them off the dunes and off the vegetation.
So what I'm hearing you say then is there is possibly a need to formalize these current access points. Am I correct?
No, I'm not. I don't think I'm saying that either. I think I'm just saying that people are doing it and they're just there. It's just what it is. I'm not advocating one way or the other. I don't know that we want to advocate additional dune access points. I don't know how the state would feel about that.
Okay.
I'm just
Can I-
merely making an observation.
Can I
Okay.
interject, please?
Sure.
Speaking for Chinook, there are remnants of indigenous trails, Clatsop Chinook trails, still there in the Gearhart area and also north of Gearhart. And those trails were obviously in place, or the trail actually, or trails from the Hammond area south to Seaside were always utilized for gathering on land, gathering roots and such on land, and were well used as along with the water trail that used to well, actually part of it still does, but used to travel from the Hammond area to Seaside to connect with the southern communities and villages. We don't make a practice of just willy-nilly making our own trails wherever we want. We use the most advantageous trail over and over again. And I think it would behoove the organizations that are involved in maintaining trails, or even other advocate groups, to establish a land trail and regulate it so that people don't, like Gail says, decide to go into the understory and destroy habitat that should be maintained. If they so like to just recreate and just walk on the trails between two distances, and their business is not to go out and gather or look for food sources or materials for making implements and cooking implements and the such, that we should encourage some kind of maintenance of a single trail that we could keep people on. I think that would be the wise course for the future.
Is that Gearhart trail the one commonly called the Ridge Trail that is parallel with 101 and west of it on the first dune west of 101? Because it's also a sore subject because of people feeling it's their private property.
I believe that's Robert talking. Is that correct?
It finally is. CenturyLink has disappeared from my life since Tuesday morning, and ostensibly is sending a repair person today. But that's why I'm making strange contact.
Well, that's good to hear you. Yeah, in reference to the Ridge Trail, I believe that is in the city of Gearhart. Am I correct?
Correct.
Can I weigh in?
Yes. Go ahead, Carol.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Ridge Path is and has been in the original plat of Gearhart since 1892, I believe. And it is it follows the original Native American trail and I can't think of anything more exciting than extending it beyond Gerhardt to what Don was talking about, to the source, or the other end of the trail is Hammond, I believe, is where the tribes would travel up north and south between the Columbia and the Nicanicum for their needs. And I never have thought about it being beyond, I mean, I knew it had to be beyond Gerhardt, but I don't know where it is. And maybe just identifying it would be a good start.
I think that's an excellent idea. So then if, Gail, if you could, I'm sorry, I'm having you jump around here, bring back up the Oregon Coast Trail. So the Oregon Coast Trail is actually on the coast, or I'm not exactly sure where it is. Is it along the beach?
Yes, I think.
Okay. So
I
what you're
believe that's
talking about then,
I'm sorry. I believe that's
Go
because
ahead.
the Oregon Oregon Highway Division, which obviously claims the beach to be a public use, just went ahead and defined the trail as part of the Oregon Beach,
Okay,
or the Clatsop Beach.
okay.
And that's why you see that straight line.
Indeed, it used to weave into Gerhardt early in prior years and connect with the Ridge Path, but then they eventually found that too confusing, I'm guessing, because people couldn't find it. And so they just made it all along the beach.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, that sounds like a good project for the future for a trails group to more or less, I'm just going to call it an extension of the Ridge Path from Hammond, at least to Gerhardt. But that sounds like a big task and maybe not what we're addressing today.
And Carol has an awful lot of institutional knowledge about that trail with respect to from the Nehawanda estuary north for a couple of miles.
That would be an interesting, you would be an excellent resource then, Carol.
I'd love to do this. I think before I die, I commit.
So
can I interject?
Yes,
I'm sorry.
go ahead, Don.
Can I interject a historical fact?
Sure.
That I'm apologize for not including this information earlier, but a tribal ancient named Celeste, she there's a picture of her digging clams with her clam stick on Clatsop beaches, and again, the importance of access to the beaches was that significant trail from the Nehawanda to the Hammond area, or the villages along the Tansy Point area. They would travel that trail just to access the beaches for seafood resources. And so I am going to reach out to Culture Committee to see if we can pinpoint some access points that would define where those where that trail kind of disappears or has disappeared due to development or just plain overgrowth and non-use. And maybe that would help in defining the ancient trail and making it more significant, not only to the Chinook people, Clatsop Chinook people or Chinook people, but also to the new inhabitants in the area.
Thank you, Don. So is anybody here familiar with the Northwest Coast Trails Coalition? Because they're an organization. Say again, Don?
We are not.
Okay, they are an organization that's been active mainly with mountain bikes, but they are working on coast trails. So that might be an organization to put something together, you know, rather than reinventing the wheel, use an organization that already exists. But anyway, we're digressing a little bit from what we're working on. I think this is
Mary,
very
can you hear me?
exciting. I love these sort of asides that we do. Go ahead. Who's talking?
Mary, it's Maria. It's Maria.
Oh, hi. Hi.
Hi.
Maria?
I'm assuming you
Welcome.
cannot see
I'm
me.
glad.
Thank you. I'm assuming you cannot see me. I was dialed in on, and I can see my own webcam and I can see you all, but I'm assuming you cannot see me.
No, we can see you.
Okay,
on
good. Because I've been like, anyway,
No.
trying to get your attention.
Good.
And I'm not certain if this is the right moment, but we skimmed past one comment I had. So if it would be okay if we go back to policy 4, so table 2, policy 4, coastal shorelands and other shorelands policy. And I have a question. The policy 4 currently reads, shorelands identified in this plan for their aesthetic, scenic, historic, or ecological qualities shall be preserved. Any private or public development which would denigrate shoreland qualities shall be discouraged. My question is, can we omit the words which would denigrate shoreland qualities and make it read, any private or public development shall be discouraged? So instead of having the qualifier about denigration, if we just remove that because we want to discourage all development of that.
Okay, Maria,
So caveat.
I appreciate what you're saying, but I just want to wrap up what we were talking on first, and then we'll move on to this, if that's okay. Because, yeah, so getting back to where we were, policy 7, I think, yes. I agree with Gail and support that statement fully in terms of we don't want unlimited access encouraged to the beach, which destroys dunes. So I just kind of wanted to wrap it up with that. Gail just had the Northwest Trails Coalition website up, and this may be a time, there it is. This may be a time that Carol, Dawn, anybody who's interested, that maybe we can, I was on the board and have dropped off. But I'm very interested in this, so maybe we can connect later and pursue this further. I just wanted to wrap that up. Thank you so much, and let's go back to, unless anybody has anything else on this.
Just Madam Chair.
Yes.
Is there any reason that the county plan couldn't, maybe we don't have the exact wording at the moment, but recognize this possible identifying the trail in some form or another so that it doesn't get dropped off of your policies and plans and goals, and then just helps us to research it further and firm it up or get a map or just take the next step. I think it would be great if the county plan would recognize it as whatever it is.
Well, thank you very much. I think that is a great idea. And Gail, I'm wondering if that is something that we can put on our agenda on goal 8, recreational needs.
There we go.
Yep. Not only can we do that, I made a note in our table 3 for new policies so that it'll be here as well to remind us to look at it in goal 8. So
wonderful.
And beyond recreational purposes, it is certainly historic.
Yes. So it would tie in, but that's probably its primary focus. Diane.
I have a question about the discontinuation of the trail through the Camp Rylea area. Am I reading that correctly? That it goes from the north end theoretically to Hammond and from the south end of Camp Rylea to Gearhart, but that Camp Rylea area is not part of the trail. Is that correct?
I think that you're probably correct. I don't know that at this time. I suspect that the trail would, that it's portions of the trail is in private ownership. So it would take a lot of research, fun to do, certainly doable, to see how much of it could be recreated and how it could be recreated. But I suspect that you are correct, Diane.
That's a pretty big jump in the trail to eliminate the property that Camp Rylea occupies, whether legitimately or not.
Well, I would think
Diane, it's because of the war on terror, silly.
Yeah.
the ultimate goal would be to recreate the trail as close as possible, but you know, you can only do what you can do. So that's probably not something for this committee. That's probably something with the Northwest Trails Coalition, or perhaps a new group that will be formed. But
well, we could add some language in policy 7 that at least recommends considering opening the trail through Camp Rylea.
Absolutely, I think that that's a great idea.
Thank you.
Okay, let's get back to Maria's comments.
Maria.
Yeah, I've made my comment. So can we just remove the words which would denigrate shoreline qualities such that we don't have any qualifier? It's just all development should be discouraged.
Let me think about this.
So my whole point is that if you you're only identifying any shoreline quality, shoreline qualities is kind of a limiting factor, and you know, because habitat extends beyond just the shoreline qualities. So my question is, would it make sense to expand the discouragement of development?
So what you're saying is it would be reworded to say any private or public development shall be discouraged?
That's my question to the group. Does that make sense? Because, or do you want to expand the qualifier to include perhaps habitat and other issues that are not necessarily just shoreline qualities?
Okay, so
it does make sense. You know, somewhere in the Clatsop Plains Community Plan was wording like planned orderly growth, which is, I think, politically entrenched but nonsensical. You know, because growth is not sustainable, but it's a strange times that we live in. You know, where any suggestion that unsustainable growth is a great thing as long as it's careful and orderly. It's a good question. And I think it is nonsensical to encourage population growth. But I acknowledge, you know, that that's an unpopular attitude.
So Gail, you had a comment.
So I just wanted to kind of remind everyone, I guess, that as you go down that path of making a statement such as any private or public development shall be discouraged, I think that you will find, and I'm stating this just merely to advise you, not to tell you what to do necessarily, but that statement, if you revise it that way, will be met with a lot of resistance in certain by people, some people, because it does, excuse me, it does kind of smack of just basically stripping people of their property rights, and then you're going to find yourself in a takings lawsuit. So I am very hesitant to go down that path, and I just want to put my concern on the table there. Obviously, if you do want to put it in there,
Thank you for bringing that.
It would still be reviewed by our county council, and I doubt that it would pass muster.
Could you change?
So
Excuse me.
Maria, you, hold on. Let me ask a question here for Maria. Maria, so you mentioned deleting it, but also expanding it. Could you say that again on the expansion?
Well, I guess my point is that in trying to understand the intent of the policy, the intent of the policy is to protect the shoreline, right? So if the intent of the policy is to protect the shoreline, and discouragement is not denial. It's not that it's impossible to do. It's just that to Robert's point, it needs to be heavily considered before it's approved, right? So I guess, and I'm not hung up on how you want to word this, whether you want to omit which should denigrate shoreline qualities, or if you, instead of omitting that, add more qualifiers to that. That's good too. I guess, but my point of bringing this up is that if you only have which would denigrate shoreline qualities, that does not address issues of habitat, for example, or waterways. I just want to make sure that if we're trying to keep to the spirit of what this is attempting to cover, that we cover it sufficiently in either doing it by omission or inclusion. I don't know.
Could you say negatively impact instead of degrade? And then
I guess to me, degrade or negatively impact. To me, the bigger issue is shoreline qualities, because shoreline qualities is, one could argue, if I were an attorney, well, this is not exactly at the shore, although the habitat would expand, be part of the shoreland and also around it. So habitat wouldn't be included, as an example. So, how big is the circle you can draw around the protection? That's my point.
Well, I think in that respect, shorelines are, if I'm reading this correctly, shorelines are identified. So it is there. It's a defined area.
Mm-hmm. Right. So if a habitat crosses the shoreland, so it's part in the shoreland and beyond it, are we, is it protected? That's my question.
Yeah, I'm not sure that you're also bumping up against private property owners' use of their land as well. And so when you get outside the designated area, I mean, I could designate all of Clatsop County as that should be protected, and I'd be happy with that. But I do understand that people do want to use their property, and this policy, what I'm looking at, is at least puts the brakes on for identified shorelands.
Okay.
May I weigh in,
Thanks for the
Ms.
question.
Yes, go ahead, Carol.
The policy is quite discretionary to start with, from start to finish. And Gail's point is right. But are those shorelands indeed identified for their any aesthetic, scenic, historic, or ecological qualities? Is there any such identification on those topics? If there is, then that would be where you would attack the development as to how it might affect the aesthetic, scenic, historic, or ecological qualities. I was wondering if shorelines are identified in those ways anywhere in the plan, or if this is it. And so,
do you know, Gail?
Yeah, I think that we do identify coastal shorelands in goal 17. So they are identified, and there's a series of maps that shows which specific areas are covered.
Okay.
So this is goal 5.
Yes. So
Well,
I do have a question.
This is actually
Go ahead.
the Clatsop Plains Community Plan. So one of the things that I've added is, as a recommendation, would be to include the same policy generally in goal 5, and also or possibly goal 16 or 17.
Oh, I see.
Which are which are estuarine and coastal resources. So I had this brought up a question in my mind, Gail, that perhaps you can answer. Is this particular policy specifically written to be open to interpretation so that it can be a little more flexible? Do you have any idea on that?
I don't know what the intent was when it was crafted 40 years ago. If there was anybody who had any type of law degree, I'm sure that they deliberately would craft it to be flexible and open to interpretation.
Okay.
And what does, actually, this is a nitpick, but what does discourage mean in this context? I mean, what's the process for discouraging inappropriate use for any of these kinds of lands? Because like Mary said, one's, aesthetic is another person's, McMansion on Strawberry Knoll. So is there a process for discouraging the kind of development that we're actually concerned about here? Does the county have a process for discouraging, especially private development?
I think our policy, which is not a written policy, is that when someone would come to the counter with a question about doing something in the protected area, that the person at the counter would generally cite this policy and say, this is really a bad idea. Here's 10 reasons why it's a bad idea. If that doesn't work, we don't necessarily have a plan beyond that. I guess we could develop something like I can come out and pout and stamp my feet and demand that they not, and bring out maybe a little chipmunk or something, and say think of the chipmunks.
So that assumes that a permit would be requested for any of the development that we're concerned about, to get the person to the counter where they can be discouraged.
Well, this is Julia. And so typically with these kinds of requests, when they come in, they require a review use of some sort. They are these types of things in the shorelands overlays. They are not typically simple type 1 administrative reviews that somebody can just bring in their development permit application and say, yep, there you go, and have us sign it off. They typically require review and long sections of code to respond to, sometimes with the use of a consultant to identify endangered species, or it becomes more complex. It typically is a more complex application, and maybe that's the discouragement. You have to have the wherewithal to do it, and that's going to include money. So I suppose it's a little elitist, but somebody has to really decide, this is what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to do it, and then we are going to have a lot of conditions of approval to mitigate these negative impacts. It's not a small process, even if it's not something that goes to the Planning Commission, even if it's a director's decision, which is just a type 2 conditional use or review use. It still needs to be well thought out. It may involve DEQ sign-offs or review. It may require engineering for erosion control or stormwater drainage. And so it's not a small thing, even if it's just a type 2, but it's almost never a type 1 administrative review. It inevitably requires more review than that. if that helps.
Thank you.
So what I'm hearing then is that this policy supports the county's desire to make sure that if a development happens, it is well thought out, and many factors are considered. And in that respect, it sounds to me like this policy meets the attitude that we're looking for. Other comments?
I got a question.
Yes.
So I think I understand what you all have been saying. I guess the challenge I run up with, and Julia, I really respect what you just said, that it's not as simple as it looks, but also it's possible with enough money, anything can happen. So I guess what makes me uncomfortable with leaving it is that, and I acknowledge that perhaps this is not solvable at this level. Maybe it's later on down the path, but it's like going to the planning commission meetings that we've spent, lots of time going to. There might be a consensus that we don't like this, and this isn't a great idea, but we can't stop it because there's no mechanism to say no. There's only a mechanism to say yes, and that's what worries me. There, that's my speech.
I hear what you're saying, Maria, and I agree with you. On the other side of the coin is, private property rights.
No, I get it. You're right. I totally get that. And but there has to, in order for, yeah, maybe this is not a thing we can answer here. This particular thing just kind of like slapped me across the face, and I'm like, wow, that's kind of rough.
So why don't we do this? If you can come up with language that better states the objective that you're trying to obtain, how about if we come back to this policy next month?
Sure. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I don't know that I'm going to come up with anything better, but I'd be happy to noodle on it.
That would be great. And I'm not saying that you have to come up with anything. I'm just giving you the opportunity to do that. Because this is obviously not stating what you would like it to state. And you have some opinions on this and some passion. And I just need a little more understanding with some language, proposed language even. So if we could noodle on that for a month, and maybe this is as good as it gets, but maybe you'll come up with something that will be better. Does that sound okay?
That's fine, totally fine with me. And I guess Gail or Julia, I also look forward to your insight and guidance on the probability of finding any language around this. Or I don't know if I guess what I'm realizing is that the comp plan is one thing, but then there are subsequent components of the execution of the comp plan where this might fit better into.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's kind of where I'm not as familiar. So maybe this is as good as it gets, yet we could add something into the regulations or the guidelines or I don't know, whatever comes after this, to help streamline, clarify, make this, I guess, a little more comfortable.
Okay. Sounds good.
So can
Anything
I
else?
move on? Oh,
Is there anything else on this? If not, let's go ahead and I think that, is there anything else on table 2? Hearing nothing, let's move on. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just have it's a weird rhetorical question. What is an unnecessary right of way?
That's would be a good definition. Okay, I'm going to take a guess here, and I'm going to have rely on Gail and Julia to correct me. But my guess would be like an unused railroad right away.
Yeah, that would be a good example. Also, we have areas of the county that were platted a long time ago, and the roads, the public roads, have all been dedicated to the public, but they've never opened up the roads or built them. And it may be that the plat was just drawn on a map without anybody ever ground truthing what might have been out there, and so it may be just all wetlands, or it may be sometimes you can see subdivisions that maybe get extended into the ocean or into a body of water, and it's not physically possible to do it. But there's just a lot of old subdivision plats that are out there where the roads probably will never get built or won't ever need to be built, and so they're just
like
out there.
Like all of Sunset Beach, where it was platted. The entirety of Sunset Beach was platted in 1907. Just as if it were a flat piece of earth.
Yep. Does that answer your question, Maria?
Yes, thank you. I just couldn't. Is it a defined thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, oh, sorry, you can't see what I'm looking at. Hold on. Okay. So, for example, this is Sunset Beach. So you can see the white, which is where the road has been opened, but then you can see the boundaries. Those are the platted rights of way.
Oh, okay.
So,
Got it. Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Good question, Maria. Okay, moving on to table 3.
Let me add a teensy complication to Maria's understanding, is that generally people don't know the difference between an easement and a right-of-way. And even when it hits the judicial system, there is still ignorance about what the difference is. So, for example, Burlington Northern often never owned where their railroad went, but when it got chopped up, people didn't know the difference. So you have pieces that were easements that were extinguished when the railroad quit using it, that were treated as if they had been owned by, and then Burlington Northern ostensibly sold it when they never owned it in the first place. So it's not as simple as it sounds.
Good point, Robert. So moving on to table 3, new issues and policies worksheet. Comments?
So, Mary, can I just interrupt for a moment, if I may, please?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
Philip Johnson, who is the liaison representative from Camp Rylea, is also on the call. He's one of our committee members, and because of a mix-up in email addresses, he hasn't been getting the agendas. So we have straightened that out, and he is here today. And I don't know if he wanted to introduce himself, but I did want to make sure that everyone knew that he was in attendance today.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. No, thank you, everyone. I'm still trying to get on go to meetings, but I'm here, and I'm glad we fixed the email issues, and I look forward to working with everybody in any way that we can help here at Camp Rylea or the Oregon Military Department. We'll just be part of this. We're very pleased to continue to be part of this collaborative group here. I won't take up much more time. That was a great conversation, but thank you for allowing me to introduce myself.
Well, welcome and glad to hear from you. So going back to table 3, any comments? Have you all read it? Staff recommendations?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a little confused on this, Gail. It's proposed policies, issue to be addressed, and they're all staff recommendations. So when it, for instance, in the first one, it says a section of the Nehalem River within Clatsop County was designated as an Oregon Scenic Waterway in 2019. That sounds like a statement, not a policy. So can you help me understand?
Yeah, I think it's just the way that he might have worded it. I mean, it's not a recommendation. The issue is not a recommendation. The issue is what it is. I think that when Ian drafted it, he was just trying to differentiate between things that staff had identified for possible policies versus what the committees came up with. So the issue that needs to be addressed is that part of the Nehalem River has been designated a scenic waterway a year ago. We haven't updated the comprehensive plan yet, so the proposed solution would be to, basically to add the policy, add it to the inventory of resources, and then draft policies to be consistent with that. So
okay, that's making sense to me now. I'm sorry, I just didn't get it.
Yeah, no.
So under proposed solutions, is everybody in agreement to go ahead and accept those recommendations?
Yeah, and actually on these two, we really don't have much choice. Under state statute and OAR, they're going to be they're going to be required to be put into the plan. So whether you want to or not.
Okay, well, thank you for the update in terms of our information, at least. And I think that we have come to the end of our agenda, unless there's something that I've missed. Would somebody like to bring something up?
I had a question. The narrative description of goal 5 on page 43 about why Clatsop Plains is eliminated from the inventory of protected properties. It sounds from the narrative description like there are just too many trees, and so scenic doesn't enter into the conversation. But the original list included Clatsop Plains, and I think they're talking about the area east of the highway, which is forest land, paper company land. Used to be Crown Z, and I don't know who owns it now. But it seems like it belongs on the inventory, and it's been eliminated, and it said it was addressed in goal 8, but I didn't find an appropriate explanation for why it was eliminated.
So help me out here, Diane. I'm not seeing where that is.
Page 40, if Gail scrolls all the way down to goal 5 narrative, and then I think it's page 40. It wouldn't probably be page 43 on that.
I see.
Yeah, it's let's see, I think you okay, now go back up to and then where am I? So I think this was the justification for eliminating it, but eliminating Clatsop Plains from the inventory, but it doesn't make sense to me.
There are two things. One of them, I think, touches on Diane's, that when the scenic byway was developed by ODOT, it was clear that generally people thought anything from Cannon Beach Junction north was a pile of shit. Exactly. And all that mattered was south of Cannon Beach Junction. And it certainly was also part of the bypass rules that it could not be used to affect or to discourage development. But, so the fact you had a scenic byway was not to stop real estate from its advance against nature.
I think that's exactly right.
It was a little bit of a hard fight to get the nice scenic byway signs put along there. Two of them, which have come down, are where the Sitka spruce swamp was up there by Les Schwab, and then the other one was just below Walmart. But anyway, that's kind of background on scenic byway. That there were plenty of beautiful places all the way along 101, but it had to be near enough that you didn't have to pull off very far to see it. And so to have to go all the way from 101 over to Cullowby Lake and look north there, that was a little bit of a stretch. Or to go all the way to Sunset Lake and look at the north end where Joe Backinson made sure the county gave up its property on the north end and that it was sold to the country club.
So, Robert, are you saying it's okay that Clatsop Plains is no longer was eliminated from that inventory?
No, I'm saying there is a lot there. I have maybe 40 pictures from Young's Bay down to Falcon Cove. That seem clearly scenic. There are views of the East Fork of the the East Fork of the Neocoxie right along Highway 101, but you have to go stop, take a look at it, and say, "Wow, that's rather dramatic," because basically it was more an issue that there were literally around 10,000 little bits of signage that have been installed to try and draw attention along the highway in between Young's Bay and Cannon Beach Junction. It was tallied that there are that many little signs saying, "Hey, watch out! Look out!" Which tends to show that there was no sense of photographic beauty. A second piece, just before I forget it, is there's a big deal we need to keep in mind where it talks about private ownership between where the chain of title begins pre-statehood, when it went straight from the federal government to the first Anglo owners. So I'm talking like there at Diane's, Pat Lake, Smith Lake, Sunset Lake, the adjacent landowners have been told that they own to the middle of the lake. That couldn't happen post-statehood, where all submerged and submersible lands belong to the Department of State Lands, representing every individual human being. So it's a curiosity, and it's also like when something is called a navigable river. Well, are they talking about pre-1878? Not to do with statehood, but as to definition of navigable, there are weird things about Clatsop Plains, and two things to remember is when were waterways declared navigable, if they existed before 1878, and I'm talking about, for example, is the so-called Skipanon River a navigable waterway? It's not as simple as it sounds. Is Smith Lake publicly owned? In other words, do we need to make sure that people can take their canoe and get to it from the little county-owned lots on the southwest shore of Smith Lake? Or is that all privately held? You know, because it flies in the face of common knowledge that all submerged and submersible lands are publicly owned. You know, and I'd say the same thing on Westlake. Most of Clatsop Plains was given away by the federal government without bothering to obtain it from the Indians in donation land claims. So, for example, Westlake, it looks like what would be a public lake. Well, gee, it was Josiah West donation land claim from the federal government. So is that a public waterway or is it entirely private? And it, you know, so there are things where the county council shouldn't be expected to know the answer off the bat. But the end of those two topics, the scenic byway and private public ownership of lands for the title to the Anglos started pre-statehood, period.
Okay.
That's quite a history. Thank you, Robert.
Yeah.
That wasn't really, I mean, and I appreciate having that understanding, but that wasn't really my question, which was, should all of Clatsop Plains be eliminated from the inventory?
So this is my question, Diane. Where in this document did you see that the Clatsop Plains has been eliminated?
What was it, page?
You
20?
said page, go ahead.
Oh, gosh. I can't manipulate this document, but it's
because I don't recall.
There was an inventory, Box Creek, there were like 8.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And initially Clatsop Plains had been on it and then they eliminated. And then it was eliminated saying pretty much what Robert said, only not so articulately or long, that there were just too many. It was like, can't see the forest for the trees. It was just too much.
And kind of all we want is to be sure we save an example of what used to be here.
And that would be nice if they even put an example on there, but basically this list does not include any scenic byway for the Clatsop Plains from the Warrenton city limits down to the, Cannon Beach.
It'd be because it's not special enough.
So
I'm not seeing what you're referring to, Diane. I don't see where Clatsop Plains is there and then eliminated. Is that, what am I not understanding?
Yeah, so if you look at the screen, Mary, so it identifies the 7 sites that are made the final cut, so to speak, on the resource inventory, which includes Box Canyon and some other places.
Yes.
And then right beneath that, it says the Citizen Advisory Committee did identify additional sites. So number 3 is the Coast Range Foothills Clatsop Plains.
Okay, there it is.
Yeah,
there it was. and I think this was a very long answer to a short question. My feeling is that there should at least be some representation for this spectacular, it's not the windswept coastline of between Manzanita and Cannon Beach, but it is, I think, belongs in the resource inventory. Anyway, that was my point. Put it back.
Thank you. Thank you, Diane, for bringing that up.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Gail.
Yeah, so if you read the last statement, it says the Coast Range Foothills at the Clatsop Plains are not included because they have already been treated in the general discussion of the scenic qualities of timbered uplands. So
Yeah, and that's wrong. I mean, that they haven't been specifically treated. They've just been collectively treated. And I think that it isn't wrong. It's not misstated. It just doesn't cover the issue that there's a large swath of land, of scenic land, that isn't represented in the inventory.
So there's no reason why it couldn't be added in.
Right.
So if that's the consensus, then we would do that evaluation process where we look at the environmental, social, economic, and I think energy is the fourth E, 30 impacts of doing something like that, including the Clatsop Plains. We'd have to define an area, obviously, of
Right.
what that would be, but then go through that analysis process, and then if it passes, then we can include it. So
It sounds like a lot of work, but that it would make sense to me to not have that whole 20 miles of scenic not represented in any way on the inventory. It is represented, but it's not represented on the inventory.
So is that?
I don't know. I don't know if the south end of Clatsop Ridge is well defined, but generally Clatsop Plains is really easy. That it extends from the foot of Clatsop Ridge west to the ocean. And that certainly takes care of it all the way up to Young's Bay. As to whether Clatsop Ridge gets labeled as such all the way down to Cannon Beach Junction, I don't know the answer.
So what I'm hearing, that there is support to add a recommendation into the plan to identify the Clatsop Plains as a scenic site. Am I correct?
Or certainly pieces of it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
So,
as Robert has explained, there's a tremendous diversity in that scenic site from here to there.
So policy wording might be develop, and Gail, you're going to have to help me with this wording, develop a plan, a process to include Clatsop Plains as a scenic resource site.
Re-include.
Yeah. I don't know that it was originally included. All right, so.
It wasn't. It was originally carefully excluded.
Yes, that's right. It was mentioned. It was mentioned, but not included. Yeah, that's correct.
They had some great concrete seagulls, and that was about it.
This is Julia. I was just going to mention that I believe the Tag Ranch is listed in the historic inventory. Is it not?
The ugly, crappy old house is, I think, kept in protection. So it just sits there rotting. It is not an architectural gem by any stretch of the imagination, but it at least got identified as something that we're supposed to drape every night before we go to bed.
It's close to the road. Maybe that's why.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we could swap it out.
And they had historic ties,
Yes.
to all the people in the area, the Morrison family.
Right.
So to direct us back onto what we're talking about here, thank you, Gail, for this wording. Whoops, there it goes. Here's it's back. Conduct ESEE for Clatsop Plains or portions thereof within 1 year of plan adoption. So can you spell out ESEE?
Yeah,
I mean, what is it?
It's the process that you go to where you're going to review the sorry, I get my cursor over here. The environmental, social,
Okay.
and I don't remember if it's energy and
Economic.
economic. Is that the order they go in, Carol? I always goof it up.
I think economic is first, just to be exact. I'm not sure either.
Social, economic, and energy.
Okay, so this at least starts to remedy what was an oversight in the old plan and brings it up to date. Does that sound like what we're shooting for?
Thank you, Mary.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for bringing that up, Diane.
I tried to send Gail 45 photographs that were taken back when the scenic byway was being devised, except it was too large a file for that to go through. So I have pictures of 45 specific places that I'm happy to send anywhere that were actually used in the scenic byway process.
So that sounds great, and that's something that can be used within a year of the plan adoption, hopefully, to move forward on this.
Clatsop Chinook would like to see that also. Those
Good.
pictures.
Oh.
I can send them in smaller lumps. It was just when it got to be so huge, it got handled differently. So, and again, at the moment, I don't have internet, I don't have telephone, but just ask and I can send them in smaller chunks, and we'll be happy to do that. I just don't want to lay that many JPG monster photo files on someone unexpectedly.
So Gail, would those pictures be something that could be kept in county records somehow for when the study takes place, or is that something that needs to be done once the study starts?
Well, I don't know necessarily that the photos will be a critical part of that. I think they're good to have for reference and to help bolster findings. But I know that Robert has tried to email them to me, so we can just have them here.
Yeah, I could even, it's better to give them to you digitally than otherwise.
Okay, well, that's great. Thank you, Diane. Thank you for bringing that up. Cleaning up some of this old verbiage. Is there anything else that we want to cover today? Any public comment or input, or just plain old comment and input?
Hope to see you in 2021. It still remains what the Trump timber anxiety axis will do with the planning process. And if I don't see you in the future, love and hugs, and it's been a pleasure working with you.
Well, I'm sure that we will be getting it together again January 2nd, Thursday, 2 p.m. And I'm sure we'll still be on Zoom. Thank you, everybody, for all your hard work, your thought that you've put into this. I really appreciate it. As usual, I think we are the best committee. Go forth, be safe, and be well. See you all next month.
And thanks to the Colonel for joining us today from Camp Rylea.
Happy holidays. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.